Hello, everyone. How are you doing? And welcome to another episode of the Dr. Will Show, where I interview educators and entrepreneurs on leveling up. Each episode, I zoom in someone who's dope, and we just have a conversation on what it means to live your best life. Now, today with me is someone who does not need an introduction. This is Dr. Sarah Thomas, who is doing it big time. She's balling out there. I hope now I have a title for this show. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I'm going to title this show 444 because I know you're going to be dropping that type of knowledge today. So for those who will be watching or listening on iTunes or SoundCloud, will you please introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. Good morning, Dr. Wills. Thank you so much for having me. I think this is my third time here, and I love it each time. Love chatting with you. My name is Sarah Thomas. I am a regional technology coordinator in a big district in Maryland. That's one of the many hats I wear. Another thing I do is I'm a founder of EduMatch. I'm wearing a shirt right now. I know that the people who are listening won't be able to see it, but the people who are watching are. So shout out to all the EduMatchers out there. And do a number of other things that we'll probably discuss in the episode today.
Yes, Sarah, and she's so humble that she don't want to use them letters, which when it has nothing to do with business, I tell people to call me Will, but with social media branding and such, I put the letters on it because I'm trying to make them dollars. But you just like real like, I'm just Sarah.
No.
So you're doing a lot of things, but what made you become an edupreneur? And when did you know that it was time to start charging people?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Great question. And I have to honestly say I learned a lot from you listening to the show over the years, all the conversations we've had. But I feel like I've always had that kind of entrepreneurial spirit since I was a kid. And, I was always getting into something. I remember when I was in high school and my mom was like, you need to settle down. You're all over the place. And I was just like, I'm just, staying interested, doing me. So that just was kind of, how I grew up. I grew up in a household full of people who kind of did for themselves. Like my mom and my dad, they both started community newsletters. They did a variety of different things. So I had those role models as well as an older brother who started being an entrepreneur when he was a teenager and started DJing. So, I had those role models. I would say that in the educational space, I would say that it's been kind of recent to start charging, but I always kind of had in my mind what things I would charge for. And a lot of those things, they include when you interact with like large organizations, things of that nature. So once I started doing that and once I started being sought out to do things, then that's when I started charging.
So in this game, especially, we're on Twitter and we're connected. We see a whole bunch of folks out there. There are Google folks, there are Microsoft folks. There are people who, when they consult, they talk about school culture. And then you have people who just talk about sort of overreaching or specific ideas in ed tech, like blended learning or going one-to-one. How did you discover your niche?
So for that one, it's going to sound a little counterintuitive. The thing that I spend the most money on going broke, I found that is my passion and that is where I need to be. So for me, it was connecting educators, connecting with other educators. I started doing EduMatch back in 2014, and this just kind of carried me forward because it filled a hole in my life. So that was what I was passionate about. And, I noticed I was spending a lot of money on this, just kind of, keeping this going. But eventually, that became like my thing. So I guess it's like what you're drawn to. And, you know, a lot of times as educators, you know, we have our passions that we bring to the classroom with our students. So the same thing we could do, we can bring our passions to our networks. And, you know, that could be our niche right there.
They say them niches bring them riches.
I love it.
So within the macro of things, you know, there's these broader reaching ideas, and then you go more granular, and that's where people can really make those big checks, like Angela Myers and You Matter and Eric Schenninger and digital leadership. In assessing your talents, your interests, and your purpose, what was your process in determining your unique space and value add?
Good question there. I would say that it's really the why that drives everyone. Like I've heard both of them talk. I've heard both of them on podcasts, and they were talking about things in their lives or in their careers that kind of sparked that fire for them. So for me, my why was kind of twofold. It came from my personal and from my professional. Just where I was born and raised, and there's in my neighborhood specifically growing up, I felt isolated a lot of the times because I was the only one who looked like me. I was definitely the only kid whose family was from Haiti on the block for a very, very long time until I got to high school and I started meeting other Haitian American students. But in the advanced classes, you know, then those tend to be very segregated in different parts of the country. I could say right now where I work, then that's not the case because our district is primarily students of color. But growing up on the other side of the bridge, then I was often the only person who looked like me. So I kind of grew up with this feeling kind of alone. And you know, that's always that feeling has stuck with me. So when I became connected and I found that I could, you know, find other people out there, like-minded individuals, like-minded in the sense that we all want to get better together. We all want to connect. We want to grow. Then that was pretty much an aha light bulb went off in my mind that this is just something that I just need to fill that. I need to fill that gap. I need to fill that hole. And I would say the second thing on the professional side, then my first few years kind of mirrored that feeling of isolation. I came through alternative certification. You and I have had conversations about being communications folks. And when I came to the field, and I was still very young, I did make some rookie mistakes. However, I felt like a lot of times I wasn't given the freedom to make a mistake, learn from it, and grow. Like, you know, you really need those first few years. It's a learning experience, and you learn so much by doing. And everybody makes mistakes when they first start. But again, I was feeling isolated. So connecting helped to fill that kind of that feeling of isolation, professional isolation. Even though by the time I got connected, and I was in a great school, great staff, you know, really had a feeling of family, but the experience of those first few years kind of lit that fire under me.
So you're doing all sorts of traveling, and the thing, you know, I have sat back over the years and watched Jenny McGarrah and Eric and other folks. I see them traveling, they popping up everywhere, and I'm like, oh, they leaving the school system soon, because they're really out there doing it. And you are doing a lot of traveling yourself around the country. What is it like to do all of that traveling, and how do you balance that travel with your actual day gig?
I love the word that you used about balance, because it a lot of times it feels like, you know, kind of being on a tightrope sometimes, but in a good way. You know, like I said, my mom used to tell me that I was kind of all over the place. And I mean, that's just kind of like my workflow, right? So I am blessed to work in an amazing district, on an amazing team with some, you know, amazing folks. I know I'm saying amazing a lot, but it's very true. And they have all poured into me over the last 14 years now. So I've known most of them for the majority of that time. So I'm very blessed to work alongside these awesome folks. As far as the traveling goes, then I tend to do that mostly on weekends. The conferences I go to, most of them are on weekends. And if they're not on weekends, then I take annual leave to go to the ones where I'll present, for any kind of compensation, because you can't double dip. So, so definitely taking that annual leave. But yeah, and I found that approximately half the year, when it comes to conferences and things of that nature, approximately half the year is very busy, and the other half is pretty light. And it's not like a 6 month, but it's kind of sprinkled all over the place. Yes. So I love both worlds equally. I really love working in the district, working with schools, with staff, with educators, with students. I feel like that really feeds me. And in addition, I love getting out there and meeting folks, who I talk to online a lot, but don't get to see face to face. I love speaking with them. Even as an introvert, I still love it, because just, the work that my colleagues around the world do really inspires me.
It's the travel thing that gets me. I haven't done any cross country stuff. All of my paid gigs have been within the state, and the driving, so far has been, cool. But I'm just thinking about it, because going to ISTE and leaving ISTE, that travel was like, wow.
You drove?
No, I didn't drive.
Oh, okay.
I didn't drive, but it was the whole thing of, going to this airport and then, waiting in lines and trying to get your bags and getting out and leaving the airport, trying to get to the hotel and all of those things. And I just can't even imagine how people sort of do this on a regular basis.
Oh, TSA pre-check is a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing.
So at this point, you're a well-known commodity.
Oh, thanks.
You are. Come on now, dog.
I appreciate it.
Don't act like people don't know you. How do you decide on which speaking engagements are a right fit for your brand, and which opportunities to turn down?
Okay. In terms of the speaking engagements that I choose to accept, then there was one point where I was accepting every speaking engagement that came my way, paid or unpaid, and I was just like kind of going out there. I started doing so in maybe 2013, I want to say, right after I got connected, and I would go on Twitter and look for a call for presenters, and then, just apply for everything. And if they said, yes, you're in, then I would just like go. And I was still in the doc program, so I was taking out loans, and with the extra, that's how I would like get from point A to point B. Like, people would always ask me, wait, you have a rich aunt or something? I was just like, yeah, Sally Mae. So, but that was then. And that was kind of like a risky move, but I feel like it did pay off. But now, I don't have the luxury to do that. I'm not going to start taking personal loans to fly here, there, and everywhere. So I've had to be kind of selective on where I go. So one of the things I do not related to education, one of the very first entrepreneurial for money things I did was DJ. And I still do that to this day. And I always had this philosophy in my mind. I would keep the number 300 in my mind. And, I had my rate, my hourly rate, and I would turn down any gig that did not meet that $300 minimum, with the exception if I really wanted to be there. Like, let's say that it was a friend's birthday, then I would do it for free. So it was like either free or 300 and up. And so there was a point after, I went crazy in education, going left, right, all over the place, where I had to really kind of buckle down. And this was towards the end of the doctoral journey, where the dissertation was getting ready to, the time was ticking. It was like, mission impossible. So I started just going to conferences where people reached out. And, usually when they reach out for a keynote or a featured speaker gig, I would say most of the time there's like some kind of money attached to it. So I would say yes to all of those until I kind of found myself in situations where it just really didn't make sense, like going back to that whole DJ metaphor, like it didn't meet my 300. So, and of course the number is very different when you come to education. So it's not 300 in my mind for education, but I have my number like up here, right? Mm-hmm. But I decided to adopt that same philosophy one day after I found myself getting somewhere at 2:00 in the morning because the flight was delayed. And then, you had to leave from the airport, take this ferry and go to the event, and the ferry was shut down. Because it was 2 a.m. I was supposed to get there like 7:00 and be there in time for the ferry, but the ferry was shut down. So I had to pay for a lift to take me all the way up and around. And this was like, maybe a $100 or $200 out of pocket that I didn't budget for because, I didn't think that I was going to be spending all that money. And I did get, paid back for it, but I really did not have the luxury of having that money like up front at the time to, just willy-nilly be kicking out $100, $200 I wasn't expecting. So that was the day where I was just like, okay, I need to apply that same mentality to things that, that I'm getting paid for in education.
I hear you. And now since you bring that up, that number, that's baseline of, if I don't get this, you don't get me. That has to be scary for educators who are out there who, especially in the beginning, because everyone I've had on this show, doesn't matter who they are, who their brand name is, they've all said the same thing of, in the beginning, I'm taking everything because it's about getting that money in. And once they've established themselves and are like, I only take these jobs because these jobs fit me and this is where I can sort of build my career from, they begin that no operation of, nope, can't do it. But the idea of, this is my number, right? That has to be scary, because for some people, well, for all people, that number is different, right? Because some people, they'll hit the road for $1,500, which I'm not flying anywhere for $1,500. Don't even ask me to fly for $1,500. I'll drive an hour, but I'm not flying anywhere for $1,500. But it's the whole idea of, this is my minimum. What do you tell people about making sure that they set that minimum to know their worth and know what they bring to the table, especially when, people are like, if I'm doing this, I may love it, but I'm doing it for some sort of financial gain. And for me to set that number could possibly alienate certain people who their budget is $3,000, but your bottom number is $5,000. What do you say to them about that number and making sure that they stay true to that number, even though it may scare them to stick to it?
I would say that it was very scary at first to adopt that stance. And obviously there'll be some times where I won't like you said, if it's somewhere drivable or whatever, or if I'm like on the way somewhere and then, something else pops up and, it's very easy, then definitely, situations like that are flexible. And of course, if it's somewhere I really want to be, I'll be there, I'll just go. But when you set that number, I had to think about it, because a lot of times I was finding that I would be putting out a lot of money ahead of time and, expecting to be reimbursed within a certain time frame, or there would be some hidden expenses or X, Y, and Z. And it became a financial burden on me. Like if I'm paying out of pocket $1,500 for a flight, a hotel for a couple days, a car, meals, etc., and that $1,500, I'm really needing that month to pay mortgage, put gas in my car, buy groceries. There have been way too many situations where things like that have come up, because as educators, we don't make $50 million. Like, there are some times where real life will hit. And it's in those moments that you realize that, that you have to make it worth it for you. You have to make it worth it for you. You have to have like some guidelines in place for things you're going to charge. And when I stopped completely doing things, with the exception of like a little bit here and there when people were reaching out, when I was very close to defending my dissertation, then I found that those months, a lot of times I was in a much better financial situation than when I was, waiting to be reimbursed from this place so I could, pay for the next one, to wait to be reimbursed from them to pay for the next one, So, I mean, it's like a cycle. So you gotta make it, if you're going to take the first step on that cycle, you need to make sure that you make it worth it for you, number one, and number two, put safeguards in place so that you're not, putting your own financial health at risk.
Now, how important is it for educators to get a contract signed and done up front and really pay attention to the business side of this? To quote Jay-Z, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. and a lot of us go through this education program in a traditional fashion, which, I didn't. But they go through the traditional fashion. They're not thinking about business. But along the way, they became consultants, or they thought about, or they're thinking about, hey, let me go do this thing. And so it's that business piece that they're for sure missing. How important is it for them to get that business down right, to not only make sure that it'll be enjoyable for them to really spread the gospel of what they want to share, but to make sure that it is profitable and done so in a way in which they don't become financially burdened by doing this?
It's a different mindset. Once money comes into play, then it takes some time to kind of adjust. I know when, there's lots of things I do for free, lots of things that I pay money for. You don't want to see my tax return right now, because like out of all of the things, there's like so much in the hole, because I'm paying to do what I love, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, then whenever you're dealing with money, when you're getting paid, or when you're being an edupreneur, then I would say that it's very important to get everything on paper. Like, I've been blessed, knocking on wood right now, that I have not had a bad situation rear its ugly head on me. But not in education. I would say. In DJing, yes. And DJing has taught me so many lessons. I've had to take that DJ Sarah mindset and apply that to Educator Sarah mindset, because I mean, when things are down on paper, then everyone is literally on the same page. And a lot of times, when you work with organizations, then they will have a contract. If the contract doesn't necessarily meet what you said when you had like that initial call, then say something. You know, there have been times like that where, you know, I would be on the phone with someone, we would agree to something, and then I get the contract back, and my first inclination would be sign and send it back right away, just to, you know, get it out of my hands. But something would tell me, sit, look at it, read it. So make sure that you read every single thing you put your signature on. There was one time where it was pretty much the opposite of what we had discussed on the phone. Like, it was like we had discussed doing a featured speaker session, 3 featured speaker sessions or something like that for X amount of dollars. And then when I got the contract back, then it said keynote, pre-conference, featured speaker, 6 sessions, same price. I had said, I had asked for that price plus travel. It was that price including travel. So I actually would have lost out on money had I not sat down and read that through. So another lesson that I learned from being a homeowner is, you know, always be willing to walk away, even at the closing table. So if it's not something that you can agree on, something that you can live with, then it's just not for you. And there'll be other things out there. But definitely advocate for yourself, know your worth, and stick to it.
Dropping gems. Well, they tried to play you for the okie doke.
But it all worked out. And I mean, it was a misunderstanding because there were several different people involved in the process. But still, if I had signed that and sent it, then I would have been short, you know?
I hear you. You kept listing all that stuff they want you to do. I'm like, Sarah, you are the conference. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now I want to jump into another side hustle of yours. You are now an adjunct professor. What?
Thank you.
You know how you do it. What do you teach? And what did you do to land the position?
I teach, or I should say I just finished teaching a course, ET 630, which was digital communications in the classroom. And I loved it. I had such a blast. Like, it's teaching K-12 and teaching higher ed. You know, they are very different in many ways, but they're also very similar. You know, learners are learners. And we had just a blast together. I loved just the spirit of everyone, you know, that whole cohort in the class. There were some go-getters. They did amazing work. I put challenges out there. They jumped on them. Like, one of the assignments one week was to watch a podcast and review it, watch or listen to a podcast and review it. And the next week I put an optional assignment, create your own podcast. And I had it like kind of laid out how to do it. And most of them did it. And and it sounded good. And I was just like, wow, y'all are amazing. Like, I gave like barely any instruction on how to do it, but people were turning out these amazing podcasts, and I really hope that they continue. So you also asked me how I got that position. Yeah, there was a good friend of mine who's in the EduMatch Voxer group one day was talking about it in the EduMatch Voxer group, and she was saying that the university was looking for some affiliate faculty, and if you're interested, then apply. And, you know, when she said that, then I was just like, you know, I've always wanted to, you know, kind of teach higher ed, but you know, sometimes you have that fear factor that holds you back. So I didn't say anything, but when she brought it up a second time, I was just like, this is probably a sign. So I was just like, let me go ahead and apply, you know, send my CV, see what happens. And it was just, that was serendipity. Like, the whole thing was serendipity. If I tell you a story about how I met her at EdCamp EduMatch, like in August of last year, virtually, then went to an EdCamp at that university. At the time, she was in a whole different state, but went to an EdCamp at that university, met her face to face, and was just like, whoa, you know. And it was just wild. So, you know, she was local, and then after that, just that position coming up. So it felt like the universe was kind of putting me in this position. So
I hear you. I want to do it, but I have sort of mixed feelings about it. I think, you know, if it is a side hustle, whereas, okay, I'm either at one university as an instructional technologist, instructional designer, and then at another university I teach this one class, or I'm consulting for someone and I'm doing this. I think that's cool because that's, I can get the experience and that's some gravy money. I think when that's your whole life, that's a problem, because adjunct pay, as you know, it can vary. Like I remember several years ago, right after I finished, it was a few months after I finished my dissertation and graduated, I approached this dean at a conference and we were just speaking, and I was telling him my background and all of this stuff. And I said, hey man, why don't you bring me in to teach? He was like, okay, let's do this. And then we spoke later on, and the man told me $1,800 for, I see your eyes, you heard it. $1,800 for like a 10-week course. And then they divided the money up. It was like 9 in the middle and 9 at the end. And I was like, now, I know I'm new to the game and I don't have all of these journal articles under my name. I don't have grants under my name. I'm not a superstar, not even remotely in higher ed, but they still call me doctor.
You are a superstar though.
Well, for some, maybe to my mama and my wife. But $1,800 for 10 weeks of my time, that threw me off, because I've been paid more than that for 6 hours
right.
of consulting work, you know what I'm saying? So that was kind of, whew.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, definitely, you gotta weigh it out, the amount of work you put in versus how much you're being compensated. Really have to weigh those things out, and it's gotta make sense.
Now I'm gonna jump into this money because you spoke about this earlier. You mentioned it. Now for those who are hip to the game, who we've been doing this, we understand that payment comes in what is called a net 30, net 60, net 90. And all that means, people, is you are just expected to get your check within 30 to 90 days. Now, this can be particularly daunting if they ask you to pay for your travel up front. So that's airfare, hotel, all this stuff that you mentioned earlier. Now, my wife and I ran into a situation like this a couple of years ago because they wanted us to keynote and do 2 sessions apiece. It wasn't a big deal because we had to drive 3 hours to stay overnight one night. So it wasn't a big deal for gas and hotel, whatever. But if you live, let's say in Louisiana, and you got to fly to California, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
I've heard some stories. Oh my gosh. I'm not revealing any names, but I've heard stories from people who have run into problems because of it. Because they didn't get that check at the 30-day mark. They didn't get that check at the 60-day mark. 90 days went by. 120 days went by. And so forth. This one dude told me it took him 6 months to get paid. How can entrepreneurs, because I know you talked about the contract earlier, but how can entrepreneurs sort of protect themselves, either by budgeting or some way to sort of alleviate or put a bridge over what's going on when that money does come in late?
So going back to the contract, depending on what kind of work it is, it never hurts to ask if you can ask to, to add something to it. Like whenever possible, if I'm doing like a keynote or a conference or something like that, then I ask if they could pay that day. Like going back to DJing, I would ask for half up front and then half that day. But in education, it's kind of different. Some places will take it upon themselves to send, part of it out early. I've done conferences that, send you maybe 3 or 4 checks. And that helps a lot when you're booking flights, booking your hotel, things of that nature. When you are in situations where it's inevitable that you're not able to get your money that day, then, that's a good question. It's really making me think, because most of the things that I do charge for, get paid for, they're conferences. So, the conferences usually don't have a problem if you ask for it. I've never heard a no when I did ask. But in situations where I did not ask, then I'm still trying to learn from past mistakes. And I'm thinking that that one thing to do is to not get in that whole rat race of booking conference after conference after conference after conference, back to back to back to back, that you have to pay for out of pocket. Like, that might be some times where you might have to say no. Like, if they're not able to, if they're not able to work with you in that way, and you see danger coming up, like red lights flashing left or right, then you might have to say, at this time I'm not able to do so because I have some other financial obligations that I have to attend to, but keep me in mind for the future. And I'm sure that, especially with educational conferences where they're charging and getting money ahead of time, then they will probably be able to accommodate you, especially for the larger ones.
No doubt. And people who knew understand there's a difference between a conference and a school district. Because a school district, if that money is over a certain amount of money, or however their bylaws or rules go, that stuff got to go before the board to be approved. And more than likely, you ain't getting your money that day.
Right.
So you're going to have to wait for that PO to go through so you can get your check. And so definitely understand the different people you are working with, because the money changes how everything work out differently. I also want to throw this out there to you, because a lot of states allow you can be a solopreneur. You can just do your work under your Social Security and work it that way. It'll just be like regular income that you just made. You'd also go the other route by incorporating yourself and becoming an LLC. What are the advantages of actually becoming that corporation, and how should someone think about which direction they need to go in?
I would say, for me, most of the time, go with that LLC. Because there's 2 kinds of LLCs. There's the S Corp and the C Corp. And I don't want to get it wrong. I don't want to get it twisted. So I might have this backwards, but I think I'm right. The C Corp is kind of what you think about when you think of a corporation. But the S Corp allows you that flexibility of you writing it on your own personal taxes. So that's what I have. So whatever I make through the LLC, I'm just reporting it on that one tax return. And what the benefit of having the LLC is that, let's say that something happens, right? And I'm knocking on wood right now that this has never happened. I hope it never happens in life. But let's say that I'm contracted to do a keynote and, the flight gets totally canceled, right? And I'm not able to get there. And all of a sudden, they're trying to sue me or something like that, right? So the benefit of being established as an LLC is that if somebody does sue you for something, then all that they could touch would be the assets that you have under that LLC. Like, in a situation like that, my house would be protected, my car would be protected, what's in my personal bank account would be protected. And it's just that LLC money that could be touched. But if you have a sole proprietorship, then it is, it's all at stake right there. It's all at stake. And there's another thing that I learned about that's available in certain states. I think it varies by state, but one thing that I do now is that I have my own LLC, but I also have DBAs, which stands for doing business as, so the alias companies. So I put those under the LLC umbrella, but they do different things. Like under my LLC, the Sarah Jane Thomas LLC, then I have doing business as EduMatch. I have doing business as Lady Trackmaster, you know? So you can have these fictitious names and still be protected under that LLC umbrella.
Ooh, telling you, boy, that's why this episode is going to be called the 444. She is straight dropping knowledge today. So I want to ask you about insurance before we leave. Because, as you are going through this process and then, you become the LLC, you can apply to the federal government to get an EIN number, which people, essentially the number is, once you filed a paperwork with that organization that's going to pay you, you put the EIN number in terms of how they pay you. Now, or if you were doing it by yourself, you just get your social. But I was told, get the insurance, because the insurance is another layer of protection for you. So even as you mentioned, they come after the LLC, that insurance would pay for it, and you could keep that money in that account because your insurance will go ahead and make that payout. How important is it for educators to get that insurance? Because I understand, again, we're talking about this real nitty-gritty money stuff that the beginning educator, they're not thinking about it once they start consulting. And if they don't have those mentors to set them aside or a group to kind of say, yo, this is how this money go down, they don't really think about those things. How important is it to have insurance to protect them?
My experience with insurance has come mostly from events, doing events. With the keynotes and the featured speaker gigs, then I have not gotten insurance for those, but I have gotten insurance for various events that I would do, like face-to-face type things. And those are very important because, again, knock on wood, that none of this bad stuff ever happens. But let's say that you're having some kind of conference or something like that. Somebody slips and falls, and so in cases like that, it would be very important to have that insurance present. But one thing that I did find out is that a lot of times, if you have homeowners insurance or renters insurance or condo insurance, then a lot of times you can contact that company and they can give you a certificate of insurance for whatever event you're doing. So I found that to be, because I was DJing an educational event one time, and the hotel needed that certificate of insurance. So I was just like, what? So a good friend of mine told me, just get it from your renter's insurance, because I live in a condo, so we don't have an HOA here. So she was just like, just get it from your renter's insurance. So I called them, and sure enough, they gave me that certificate. And all worked out. So
maybe I need to call Allstate.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a lot easier than I thought, and I didn't have to pay anything extra out of pocket because it was already covered under that insurance. So
nice. So before we go, what are your thoughts on the rise of the edupreneur? I know a lot of us are now starting to really get out there, and that's what I'm preaching on this show. Stop giving away your genius for free and create multiple streams of income. I don't care if it's baking cakes like Jesse. I don't care if you're knitting. You become a Lyft driver. I want people to go out there and make that money, but particularly for those who want to become consultants or authors or sell courses, curriculum, lesson plans, etc. What do you think about this sort of interest in educators becoming edupreneurs, and what should they ask themselves to actually determine if becoming a consultant or an edupreneur of any kind is the right thing for them to do? And what would you say is the one thing they need to do in order to be successful?
Ooh, I would say, let me see. Let me chunk this. So I think that the rise of the edupreneur, that's a beautiful thing. And I think just the I can't even speak this morning. The edupreneurial mindset in itself is a beautiful thing. More of us need to do that, because what that is pretty much saying that there's this need, it needs to be filled. I can fill that need because I see it. So, just that mindset to be an agent of change, whatever change needs to happen, just to get out there and do it. So, I mean, there are, sometimes there might be money attached to that, sometimes there's not, but just having that mindset to just make things happen. I think is something that we definitely need to see more of ourselves, and hopefully that we will instill in our students as well. So I guess, like, to determine if this is really what you want to do, then I'm a huge fan of jumping in feet first, not head first. Don't jump in, like in the shallow end and bump your head at the bottom of the pool. Take low risks, but go for it. You don't want to just dip your toe in, because then you'll never get in the pool. So just jump in. If it's a low risk, like for example, EduMatch was a very low risk. It was just set up a Twitter account, set up a website, tweet some stuff out, see if it works. And I mean, from that, I would have never known that in that moment that I would be here today on July 13, 2018, and that it would have turned into what it turned into. And that's not all because of me. That is because of, like, people who join, bring their ideas, bring their spirit, things of that nature. So I guess that also leads me to the answer of collaboration. And when we're creating these things and a lot of times we're meeting needs in our own life, then being open and actively soliciting input from other people who are facing those same issues. So in my case, it was simple. You just had to be an educator, right? So if you're an educator, what do you think? Oh, okay, you think we should do this? Let's try it and see what happens. And that's kind of how it grew. Let me see. In terms of the one thing to do to become successful as an educational consultant, I would say realize that this is a process and that it takes time. Like, same thing as being connected. Sometimes people think, oh, I'm going to sign up for a Twitter account, I'm going to write a blog, and 1 million people are going to read it. No, it doesn't work like that. You got to put in time. You got to put in time and develop it. So definitely when it comes to these things, to becoming an edupreneur, then it's got to be something that you love doing. It's got to be, something authentic to you, because you're going to spend a lot of time. You might spend a lot of your own money, trying to get it off the ground, and that's okay. But just make sure that it feels like, it's something you enjoy, because if it's not, then it's not going to be sustainable.
Wow. No doubt, people, and understand where you fit in. Like, I enjoy the face-to-face stuff, and for the right opportunity for me to share what I do, I'll travel. But I love the digital space. I really do. And that's why we're trying to get this course out and do webinars where I believe I can do what I do best and thrive in an environment that I love. And so I want to tell people is not try to do everything, not try to be everything, and make sure that, I guess, you're comfortable and you're in the groove that you want to be. And if you don't want to do certain things, then don't do it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Oh, Dr. Sarah. I'm telling you, I'm dropping this bad boy today.
All right.
I should be saving episodes because I'm burning them for real.
Oh yeah, I'm loving it. I'm here on my on my phone running, listening to you. I'm just like, oh yeah, Dr. Will, get it. So I'm loving it.
I appreciate you listening and supporting you, and you're sharing this on Twitter. But this is coming out. The Educators 444. That's going to be the title of this show, because, and I really wanted to have you on. I've known you for years, but from our talks in the Teachpreneur chat, Voxer, and by the way, people, if you're on Voxer, you're an edupreneur, you're thinking about becoming an edupreneur, come on and join that group, the Teacherpreneur chat on Voxer. But from your conversations in there and hearing how you really got this business down, I wanted to have you on because that's the one thing that we're missing. You know what I'm saying? Like, even that's the one thing LaVonna talked about. That's the thing about Angela Watson talked about. And even, Shelley was on the show and she said she worked in business before she became an educator. So she knew this is how I need to run the game. And that's missing from a lot of us because, we're you hear educators now. Teaching is a noble profession. I'll give away this lesson plan. I don't need the money, or you do. You wrote it. But that's what we're missing. So that's why I want to have you on the show to actually drop it and give people that roadmap on how this thing needs to look.
I appreciate that, Dr. Will. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure chatting with you.
You are so welcome. People, look, you know how I do this. The video cast is going up on YouTube. I need you to subscribe, leave your comments. The podcast itself is going up on iTunes and SoundCloud today. I need you to follow, subscribe, leave your comments, because your boy's trying to get Oprah on the show, and I want her to know that I'm just straight doing it big around here. As always, people, invest in you, EDU, peace.